Welcome again to this Scottish Ecological Design Association Green Careers Fair and Careers in Conversation. And I have a group of people that are coming from different sectors, so hopefully you'll be introduced to sectors you might not have considered. That's what this whole fair is about and why it's been organised in the way it has. And this one is called A Day in the Life. And so I'm going to ask each of these wonderful people to speak for 5 minutes about what a typical day is, and I'm sure none of them have a typical day. And then after that, it's open to you to ask questions of the panel. So there's no particular order. I think this was done in the order that people got back to me. So Maria, first of all, Dr. Maria Goddard is a medical doctor who specialises in looking at sort of green health. And this is, like so many of these sectors, a growing sector that is so important. It's about stopping people being ill in the first place often. Don't just wait till they're ill and give them some medicines, but send them out into the forest for a walk, or we'll hear all the other wonderful things you do. So Maria, over to you.
So you want a life in my day, a day in my life?
Yes, please. Would you further tell me or sit here?
I'll tell you that. Yeah, that's fine. So I've been an NHS doctor for a very long time. I worked in hospital, worked in primary care, and over the sort of past 10 years actually, all the things that I've been thinking about for a very long time have actually come to fruition. I think, why didn't I do that? And so now I am actually what you might describe as a planetary health doctor. And this is looking at the health of the environment and our population. And of course, we have this big biome and we're all living in it. And on it, and the population and environment, everything is linked towards our health. So unusually, we might hear more and more that doctors are interested in planetary health. And this just basically comes from a lifetime of experience of dealing with patients, seeing what's gone wrong, seeing what they needed 10, 20 years before they came to me, and that's all linked to what's going on in politics as well. The next one. And just go off the planet into the universe, because this is my most favourite quote. And when I come across a lot of people doing the most incredible things, and everybody has some part to play in this, they really do. The people here today, the students here today, everyone's got great ideas, and I think never lose the faith, keep going. And what you were saying about be ready because it's coming, and be ready ahead of schedule is a really good idea. We've all got fantastic ideas, and this is the most pivotal decade in history, 2020 to 2030, not just for healthcare, but for the climate, for the planet, for politics, and you guys are walking into it young and full of ideas that are really fantastic, exciting. So planetary health is taking animal health, human health, our environment and the climate, linking it all together and saying, well, what is our place in that? Because what we do in the NHS only accounts for about 20% of your health is what we do in healthcare, and the rest of it is coming from everything else, and that's really important to remember walking through life. And important for ecological design, of course, because if we have a good environment, we're going to have good health by definition here. So ecological design is really important. Every aspect, from streets, houses, food, you name it, is really important. And of course, you'll all know about the planetary boundary concept of the planet having 9 boundaries, climate change just being one small part of that. And sort of for medicine, for me in particular, there are aspects that really stand out here. We say the most important thing we face in medicine is this concept of novel entities, novel particles, novel chemicals, plastics. What are they doing to us medically? And they are doing things to us, and we need to all be very much aware of that. And these are conversations we're having more and more with our patients. We are seeing disease and disruptions to our health from these entities. So from a medical point of view, that's really important, as is climate, because heat affects health, affects our brain's function, affects how we react to the drugs and to treatments, and makes our conditions worse. So all these things are really important for your health and moving onwards, and everybody should know about this stuff. They're not just patients. When you've got somebody, you need to know ahead in advance so you can prevent those problems. And this is what I spend most of my day doing. So this just shows you, what's going on. Of course, we know the World Health Organization again consider climate change to be the biggest threat to health, and it's up to all of us to be aware of that and to try and mitigate that. And of course, we've got so many pressures on us, haven't we, as a population. So just as an example, I work in something called lifestyle medicine, which looks at your lifestyle and how that affects your health. Because in a modern society, we all have the similar pressures on us, and those pressures affect our physiological responses, and that results in disease later down the line. And if we look at modifiable risk factors, okay, there are some important factors that account for our health. 70% of the patients I see should never have been coming to me. They didn't need to get what they developed if they'd had the correct lifestyle. So we're looking at modifiable factors. So if we look at climate, and if you look globally, air pollution is the biggest modifiable factor for health. So the big killers in the world: malnutrition, lack of physical movement, okay, and exposure to toxins and pollutants, chemicals. So it's very, very modifiable. And healthcare, of course, is also contributing to those emissions, because we make 5% of global emissions. With the US taking 50% of that total, and they spend the most money on healthcare, but they have the worst health. And a lot of Americans are suffering from obesity, lifestyle-related conditions, high blood pressure, diabetes, vascular disease, and these are all preventable. And of course, we do need to discuss with our patients. This is a bit contentious. I am all for talking about climate change with my patients because it affects their health. And if you get that ticket in with patients to talk about health and climate change, then you can help change their behaviour towards a better environment. Because for a lot of people who are resistant to talking about this, they don't think doctors should be talking about it. But climate affects our health. We all want better health. So people are more inclined to be interested in the environment, change their behaviours if they think it's affecting them. I just said it really. So we're in lifestyle medicine, we're all about eating well, plant-forward diets, moving more, really important, okay, about movement is critical for health, avoiding those toxins, de-stressing, the community and purpose. And I think the climate problem that we have at the moment is fantastic, because what we all need is purpose. I think in this modern society we've often lost our purpose. This is the purpose of the decade, and this is what we need to be picking up and moving forward. And this will reduce 70% of our ill health moving forward. If we're motivated and stimulated and doing all the right things, this will give us better physical and mental health in the future, even though sometimes at the moment it seems overwhelming and very anxiety and promoting. So my role in all of this, what I spend my days doing mainly, I do see patients and I talk to patients about all these problems as well, make it relevant to them, is about making every contact count. And I say also make every career count. Because yes, we're looking at green careers, but how can you green up your career? So, could you go into a non-green sector and bring your green approach to that? And I think that is really important to hold in mind as well. You don't need to go into a career that's already green. Take your green approach into a career that needs you to change it. This is just my favourite slide because it's a bit of graffiti from the canal up at Mary Hill where I run. If anybody's seen it, it says it all, doesn't it? Fantastic. Great for the Glasgow University.
Thank you. That's gosh. That I try very hard not to talk too much as a chair, and I find it really difficult. But we did have on the panel before an environmental engineer, Janice Foster, who looks at indoor air quality, and she was talking exactly about this: the number of people suffering from asthma because of the indoor building health. And it also reinforces everything that Maria said, is the interrelatedness of everything. As SEDA land, I always get different disciplines together. They are all related. And so skills are transferable across sectors. And I would strongly urge that we've got a politician downstairs, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. It needs politicians to stop being so siloed in thinking. I'm trying to persuade them that they can take something out of the health sector, we need it, put it into the built environment to make the buildings greener so you're not ill in the first place, or put it into ranges that encourage people to go for walks. We really need less siloed thinking, and most of the people here will reinforce that, and I will try very hard not to talk too much. Okay, next on the list, Mary Doherty. So is from IBIO. I can never know how you pronounce that, but basically it's the government body that looks at biotechnology industries. So Mary, to you.
Thanks for having me. So yeah, I work for IBIO-IC, so I will pronounce it. It's the Industrial Biotechnology Innovation Centre, and we're one of 4 innovation centres set up by Scottish Government 14 years ago now, and we cover biotechnology in Scotland. What biotechnology is basically, it's trying to green the chemicals sector. So it's about that move away from fossil fuels, that reliance on harsh chemistry, and using nature and biology to make the products that we have every day. So if you go down to our stand downstairs, We're the ones who sold the Percy pigs. Because Percy pigs have, well, some of them, you have to check which ones have an ingredient in them. They either have something called spirulina or carrageenan. And these are natural sources of gelling agents and colorants. So instead of boiling bones from animals, which is what was done in the past, we use natural products. And that's just a really simple visualization of what biotechnology can do. So biotechnology is everything from things like that, it's the agri-tech sector, right through to biopharma. So one of the oldest biotech processes is fermentation, so making bread, making beer, making cheese. That's also how penicillin is made. Just using Irvine, it's really big penicillin factories. And it's used making made using biotechnology. So I'm a chemist, undergraduate and PhD in chemistry. Then went to work in the government for a year when the Scottish Government was first set up, and then has a long academic career, 15, 20 years in academia, doing research scientists. Had my own research team, and then during COVID, I had a bit of a plan to do something different, and moved into industry, and I worked in an engineering company in scientific instrumentation, and then joined iBioWest 2 years ago. And I'd always actually been involved with them as an organisation, as an academic, and working with them. And I lead skills team, so we have 3 or 4 different teams within iBioWest, so I lead skills team, I'll come into that in a minute. We have our impact team, and what they do is go out to companies and universities and try and see where the crossover points are, where industry can benefit from university, and where universities can benefit from industry. And we have almost 400 member companies now, so that's everything from my favourite one-man band, Quas Drinks. It's actually one of our former PhD students who's making a kombucha light drink. It's come from his PhD, up to the big multinationals like GSK, Unilever, who are using biotech in their processes. So we have our impact team who does all of that sort of engagement. We also have a scale-up facility, so that's our lab facility based at Henry Watt, where they are helping companies scale. So it's all very well to say, I've got this great bioprocess, it's going to change the world, I can do it in the lab. How am I going to make that commercial reality? How am I going to get that out there? So we can help companies scale from very small scale up to now up to 300 litres, and that's anything from mammalian cells, algal cells, pretty much any cellular material we help companies scale that up. A lot around recycling, renewing, using renewable sources. We have companies who are a company just based outside Stirling, my algae. They're using waste streams from the whisky industry to feed their fermentation process. They're fermenting algae to make omega-3 fatty acids, which are the really important components of oily fish. The fish don't make them; they only accumulate them from algae, so they're cutting out the middleman. They make these really nice high purity products, which are now going into the pet food industry. But then they also get clean water, which is then getting fed back into the whisky industry. So they're co-locating with distilleries. So we help support them. And actually, when I was an academic, that was my first industry project. And speaking of yesterday, they're still using the analysis we set up with the project. So it's great. Again, coming from the sector. I lead the skills team, and that's everything from schools engagements, so getting young kids interested in bioeconomy and understanding what it is, and to events like this. We also run an MSc programme from Strathclyde, which is fully funded for both students. We're starting to recruit for next year. So it's based at Strathclyde, but the students can go to other universities to do specific modules, and they do a 10-week industrial placement, so they go out to one of our companies. We have an 86% forward employment within the first 3 months from that programme, which is brilliant. One of our students this year is going to Disneyland to work for a year, so I'm not sure if we can use that in our chats or not, but she's always wanted to do it. There you go. And we run a PhD programme as well, so we have funded PhD studentships. And we also support PhD students from other universities. We have a programme called Ready for Industry. So we train students in not the scientific disciplines, but actually in the more techno-economic type stuff. So we do techno-economic analysis, we do life cycle analysis. We teach them how to speak to audiences, different types of audiences. We teach them how to work with industry. We give them the tools and the languages so they can go into a company and be ready to work, and they're not just coming out saying I've got a PhD and then really clever. They actually know how to apply that knowledge in a commercial environment themselves. Day in the life, I work at home. but I come out and do lots of events. So a lot of my time is sitting in meetings. I sit on a number of government level bodies, so advocating for skills in the bioeconomy sector. I sit on bodies of funding agencies and other organisations that are funding students to come and do stuff in the bio sector. So I'm there to advocate for the students' voice, but also to work with industry to know what they're looking for in 5-10 years to make sure our students have got the skills that they need to solve the skills pipeline. So come and see us as your Syrian table of horse pigs, some person pigs, and but you have to tell us why.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you. I find it such a exciting sector that varies from really high tech in the lab, turning algae into plastic, through to harvesting hemp as insulation, and I find that from very high tech to low tech absolutely fascinating, and my gosh, is that a growing industry to get into. And that leads nicely on to Neil as an architect who I'm sure specifies some natural materials. He's from Collective Architecture, which is the leading architectural practice in Scotland on retrofit of sort of affordable housing association type buildings, tenement flats. Really great practice to work for. So Neil, over to you.
You stole my first line.
Oh.
No, yes, my name's Neil Brady Campbell. I work for Collective Architecture. Collective was set up in the mid 2000s, 2006, 2007, and it's one of the first architectural companies in Scotland that was employee owned. So from the very kind of ethos of the company, the principle is that everyone has a shared voice, has an equal voice in terms of the direction of the office practice, and what that has meant is that we're all very engaged in what we do as architects and as designers, but also we look out for each other. So the kind of policies that we set within our practice are agreed on holistically, not by senior management, but as a group, and we're about 60 strong now. So we have offices in Glasgow, Edinburgh, and Dundee, so we're very much Scottish based, but we look internationally as well. So we deal, as Gail was saying, deal a lot in social housing. Around about 50% of our work at a certain point was social housing. And one of the, in terms of being a employee-owned business, that's kind of moved itself into the way that we operate with our clients and our key stakeholders, and many of that being residents. So we're one of the kind of leaders in Scottish architecture of bringing communities with us. We do a lot of stakeholder engagement. The project that I'm working on at the moment in Leith in Edinburgh is very community focused. And that is one is a lot of work, but it's not because of winning work, it's because we think it's the right thing to do. We want to bring people with us through that design process. So we deal with, this deals in social housing, but we also do libraries, we do public buildings. We've done a distillery quite recently, and we've got a very kind of very diverse range of work. But one of the things we also look at is different kind of sectors within architecture. So it's not just about delivering buildings and designing them, but it's also looking at the planning stage and start. So engaging with communities right at the very beginning when they've got an idea of maybe what they want to do. We've got issues or struggles. So we've got 2 projects up in Findhorn where we're dealing with local communities who want to have a progression in their local communities, but they need expertise and a friendly face to kind of help them on that sort of stage. So that forms part of our strategic work. We also have energy as a core part of our business now with Collective Energy, and that is a number of people within our office who really just deal with the costs of running buildings, and we're not thinking about it after the building has been delivered. We're thinking about it right at the very beginning. So there's a number of projects that we're doing where we're looking at, say, retrofit, which is an existing buildings, understanding what whether it's organisations or individual tenants paying on a day-to-day basis for their energy, and very sort of poorly designed, poorly sort of energy thought out buildings, and working with them to go, this is how we can improve your condition, this is how we can lower your energy costs, because I think that's one of the real things when you speak to clients, when you actually start to talk to them about, this is how much you're spending on energy right now, this is with a number of steps that we can make, this is what you'll be spending in a couple of years' time once you've gone through that process. So yeah, and on a day-to-day basis, a lot of what I do is meetings as well, but also being an architect is quite good if you're you also get to still draw a lot, you get to design a lot, you get to speak to clients and key stakeholders like residents. But I think one of the main things I've learned is I've worked a lot on university and big college projects in Scotland, and you need to have a big personality, which is you're going to be working with mechanical engineers, you're going to be working with structural engineers, clients, and like building standards, which is the people that kind of look at building standards in Scotland. And you need to be quite collaborative. And I think in terms of an energy perspective and sustainability, that mindset is one of the good things about being an architect, because you're in that kind of zone already. You can't get it done by yourself. And at the end of the day, you're asking people to go into a site and build things. So you need to kind of be quite collaborative by nature. But you also need to have that positive mindset. It's like a quote that Robert Kennedy used to give at the end of his speeches, like the US politician. He said, some people see things as they are and say why, but I dream of things that never were, and say why not? And it's that kind of positive mindset of, you need as an architect, and sometimes it's quite difficult, but I think with energy and sustainability, it feels a lot of us in Collective are very much sort of that mindset, and it's kind of pushed us on, I think. So,
Brilliant. So thank you, Neil. That's great. And certainly on the just practical level retrofit, it's inevitable that the government's going to catch up with at the moment. The emphasis very much is putting the renewable, the air source heat pump at the moment, but they're going to have to start specifying more that we do retrofit more homes. That's put insulation in, basically. It's inevitable. So there is going to be a need for both the installers and the specifiers, a big need. It might not sound sexy, but it's really needed environmentally. Thank you, Neil. And so the next on the list is Michaela Govan, so from Ocean Rights Coalition. So Michaela's a maritime environmental lawyer. I did ask I found it really difficult to get environmental lawyers. My daughter's studying to be one in London, but I couldn't. It seemed to be quite a few in London, but not many up here. So I'm so pleased you came, because again, a growing area. You will have seen in the news the court cases being won by people taking governments and fossil fuel companies to court and winning. I'm absolutely convinced environmental law is what's going to change things. We're also doing things at the grassroots. Yes, that's needed. But they're the big guys that make the big difference. That's my view. So, Michaela.
We are the guys.
And I just have to add that you were, as a young delegate at the UN General Summit, and you spoke on the British Sea Restoration project at that. So, a young spokesman.
Yeah. So I have done a few things in terms of the ocean. So before I ever did international environmental law, I was in Strasbourg speaking on what amazing work that Scotland was doing for restoring the ocean, and it was popping out at the time, and we have fallen behind. Since then, in 2023, 2022, I got involved with the Universal Declaration of Ocean Rights push. And at first, as someone who was training to be a tax lawyer, laugh all you want, it never happened, I was going, oh, that's silly. Law for the environment, rights for the environment, rights for the ocean. But the more I sat with it and tried to attack it, the less that I could. Every way was like, no, morally, this makes sense. Legally, And logically, this makes sense. So why isn't it a thing? It's politics. So what is ocean rights? And the Ocean Rights Coalition is a UK-focused organisation that's UK-focused but globally minded. Because what happens elsewhere and what happens here impacts each other. So what we're looking at is changing the standing of everyone being able to say, I'm not happy with what's happening in my marine space. But right now, none of you would have a standing if, oh, there's, let's say, toxic waste going into your local marine space. Unless you're physically injured, or unless there is a financial loss or financial injury, then none of you have standing. So what can you do? So that's where the Ocean Rights Coalition isn't going, we want to give rights to the ocean. It's giving rights to people to be able to speak on behalf of their ocean environment and the marine space. Now, we're the UK. We're surrounded by water on every side. You would think it's a no-brainer. But there's so much backlash against this. This is too hippie, it's not. It's common sense. And when you go down to it, actually, it's doable. So we have just completed our government consultation on ecocide. Because I am not pedantic about it has to say rights on the tin. You could call it a bill like the environmental or economic preservation bill. You could say something like that, and as long as in the wording it does what it's supposed to do, I would be happy with it. But realistically, if you look at ecocide, if the environment has a right to exist en masse, then it's illegal to be destroyed. So is ecocide not the first environmental right? In essence. So all of a sudden, the ecocide bill that Scotland is looking to pass becomes a lot more important internationally because it's the precedent. It's the first country to actually make it a crime. Because right now it's not. So what does my day-to-day look like? It's meetings, but it's also a lot of research and a lot of conversations between individuals. So yes, stakeholders, but what are other people saying that I'm missing? Because I can draft law, I can read law, I can write law, but I have people on the board of the Ocean Rights Coalition that are marine mammal observers. They use the law. They're actually the guys on the boats going, you need to stop the noise. I'm not the one doing that. I'm the one that can read that law, but they actually tell me how it works in practice. So yeah, you can draft law, but are you talking to the guys that are using it? And this is where, for example, the UK infrastructure bill. I don't know anything about architecture. I can tell you the first thing about building, what SEDA do. And what I'm going to say is smash the silos and mutate those thoughts. Because if we had all the answers within our field, none of us would be here. Sorry. We tend to find that the answers aren't in our field, but are in either the outskirts of it or hidden in a conversation with an unexpected field. And all of a sudden, we're having conversations about restorative ocean communities. So what this would look like is not using necessarily environmental law, but law to protect the environment. Because there is debate on whether environmental law exists. Is it law to protect the environment, or is it environmental law? If there's any law students there, feel free, go ahead. There's a paper for you. But so it is a lot of these conversations, and it's a lot of drafting. But actually, what you get at the end of the day is like eco-site bill consultation, where we have one of our members who's a student went, why don't we compare this to genocide? Because they were trying to look at a justification clause. Okay, there's a justification offense. We don't have that for murder. We don't have that for genocide. And by the way, the international courts don't even allow for military justification for genocide. So why are we allowing it for ecocide? Why is this even a discussion?
We'll have to speed up. Sorry, I mean I can see this all day, but we'll have to speed up.
So effectively, everyone can do something, and you could be a chocolate maker, you could be a geographer, and I say a geographer because there was a lovely girl downstairs who went, I don't know how I can help. Well, there's legal geography. How can you use the geography of a landscape to actually improve the area of protection? How do you use that geography to justify things? There's so many overlaps, but we are taught and trained to think in these siloed perspectives that actually everything is just on the cusp. And if I'm going to leave you guys with anything, think of Michelangelo. He was an inventor. He was an artist. He was an engineer. And he was a philosopher. Now, can you imagine he was brought back and he's told, yeah, the STEM students don't talk to the engineering students, and none of them talk to the art students, and the humanities students keep to themselves? Just think of that. How many conversations can you have with people outside of your field that give you more understanding of your field, even in areas that you've never considered? So that is kind of what I do overall.
And thank you, Megan. Fascinating. And just on a slightly more practical level, I mean, I agree absolutely with that, but if you do want to be environmental or you're not doing environment law now, I mean, like my daughter, you do a law conversion for 18 months, and then you've got, because she wants to work for Global Witness, that's her dream, but she's been told that she has to get a specialisation or something because everyone wants to work for organisations like that. So she's decided if I become an environmental lawyer, I'm more likely to get a job there. So that's the route she's taken to do. But you're right, of course, it relates to everything. And I was very encouraged. I was at an event earlier this summer, and there was that incredible Peruvian lawyer in London, environmental lawyer. She is absolutely. She's got a queue of people waiting at the door because she's just got her 7th river being given personhood, whatever it's called, rights for rivers. So she's got now every river in England and probably the whole of the UK queuing up at her door to try and get rights for them. So there is hope out there. But yes, also become a politician, speak to them. Also
You can
yeah.
be a geographer, you can be a humanities student, you can be an engineering student, and still work towards improving the environment. Don't think that you're limited by the degree you're in, and don't think that you have to be a lawyer. Don't think you have to be a marine biologist. You don't. But there is always something that you can bring. Just think, how do I make this work for the environment? What am I missing?
Okay, so thank you. And now we've got Rob Drummond, who is representing farming. As you see, I'm trying to mix all these different sectors because farming, incredible part of the environment, and they affect everything with what we do. So, and he particularly, it's interesting, we've got farmers. The last panel we had someone who is there in their boots, mucking out the pigs, but Rob is representing another side, which is more sort of digital side.
Thank you. I'm Rob Drummond. I am a farmer in Ayrshire, as well as working with Nature Scotland as well on their Farming with Nature team. I'll speak about it first and then I'll come back onto the farming side. The Farming with Nature team are developing a digital tool for farmers to measure and map habitats on their holdings. It's a fairly simple entry level for site condition monitoring for farmers and linked to the basic support payment. So that means that every farmer in Scotland that fails a subsidy will be pointed towards being involved in this project in the next 3 years. So every farmer in Scotland will have a habitat map, and building on the back of that habitat map, they'll be able to assess the habitats that they have, and then following on from that habitat assessment, they'll get a result, and we'll point them towards management that will hopefully at least maintain that habitat or improve it, whether that's a woodland, whether it's a productive area for urban land, or whether it's a nature-rich, species-rich grassland. So that's my kind of main day-to-day role. Over and above that, I am probably what the farming community would term as a hobby farmer now, given the scale, and because I work off farm. I have a 50 cow dairy herd that is farmed in partnership with another dairy farm of a similar size. We're organic certified and work with native breeds, so the dairy herd is predominantly Ayrshire cattle. And running alongside that, we have a native beef, Galway beef herd as well, we're establishing at the same time. We're all grass based in Ayrshire and we've been certified organic for about 7 years. I'd been farming conventionally previously to that, and in all honesty, it wasn't a ecological reason that drove us down the organic route. It was a commercial a drive and a financial pressures of the conventional market that made us look at our options in things that are organic, and then follow through the 2-year conversion to take us through to that organic system. What we've seen in productivity is we've been able to maintain first of all our grass growth, and that is been able to maintain our livestock stopping rates. So that means we haven't seen a dip off in production, but that is all down to taking time to manage the farm and nutrient management planning, budgeting, and to be very careful about how to do that. On a day-to-day basis, it's fairly busy. Last night was calving the cow at 11 o'clock. This morning I tagged the calf and had it registered because everything has to be registered and passported. So I've had a very mixed and varied day, and I'm lucky enough to have a very supportive partner who farms alongside me, and always been at the end events like this.
Well, I appreciate you coming along in that. I thought I'd got up early to get here, and you must have got up with the birds this morning, so thank you for that. And then finally, now we've got the forestry sector, and this time it's Rob McKenna who is representing forestry, who's from James Jones, and he'll tell you more about that. But I'm quite excited that in all the panels I've got today, I've got people working on their own, sole practitioners and things, and then but also got the big boys represented. So James Jones being one of the biggest timber processing plants in Scotland, if not the UK. So,
yeah, certainly, yeah. So thanks very much, Rob McKenna. Work for James Jones. We're a family timber processing company, a Scottish family company. Been in existence for about 185 years, so handed on through the generations. They've been very successful within timber processing in Scotland, and then also we've got sites down in Australia and New Zealand as well. And some people might say manufacturing, timber processing, how does that fit into the whole green agenda? But it's quite interesting that what's been coming from this panel already. If we're talking about water quality, air quality, climate change, products going to biorefineries to produce products that will end up in Percy Pig. What's our built environment currently made from? What is it going to be made from in future? Forestry really stands in the heart of all that. So we've got careers very much in land management, in biodiversity. It's looking out on the hillside. What do the forests look like today? Is that something we want to carry on and replicate, or do we want to do something different with that? If we look at the forest structure, we've got a lot of fast-growing conifers that were planted for commercial purposes, and we absolutely need them. I don't think often we recognise the fact that we are consumers of timber within the UK. We import the vast majority of the timber we use. We have the opportunity to onshore that supply chain to reduce the distance that timber's travelling. So, for example, one of the mills I manage, it's in Lockerbie, we're processing just over 100 lorry loads of logs today. It's all spruce, it comes from the local forest within about 60 miles of the mill, and we're using that to build houses both in Scotland and in England, so you've got a very short supply chain. I've got about 200 people working on site. Put £7.9 million into the local economy in terms of wages during the course of the last year. I've got, thankfully, third generation employees, so we've got a very long-standing tradition. Being a family company, we've got very much family values as our ethos at the heart of the company, and it's great to be able to work for a company where I've got a number of fathers and sons. I've now got a daughter, father manages a mill, grandfather used to work at another mill nearby, so it's that kind of holistic approach as well. But forestry often gets a bad rap. I mean, people see trees being cut down on the hillside and think, how on earth is that an environmentally sustainable activity? But I think if we look at the built environment we've currently got, so bringing in architecture and that sort of thing, we're looking at the amount of bricks, blocks, steel, concrete, all these sorts of products that are being used in construction. And increasingly there are innovative products that are being made out of timber that can be used to replace these products. So not only is the tree sequestering carbon as they're growing, and also storing it, so your building becomes effectively a carbon sink, and you're substituting a more polluting product. So there's a lot of good news stories around that. Talking to someone on the stand earlier on in terms of zero waste, so 100% of the log that comes into the mill is used. The bark gets sold on for horticultural mulch. The chips and sawdust we produce will either go into wood-based panels, it might end up going to a biorefinery, it might be used for biomass for energy, and the sawn timber's going into construction and other products. So we were cool in the environmental sense before it was even a thing. We were able to offer our customers carbon negative numbers before they knew they wanted them, and no one was interested 20 years ago. We were saying, there's a really good news story, you should be getting on board, you're buying this stuff, it should be good. Now, boots on the other foot almost, and we're getting chased to be able to produce more of this sort of information. But I think forestry timber processing is at an interesting crossroads at the moment. What we're deciding to plant now and how we're deciding to plant it will impact on what's going on in 20 years' time, when that timber, to 40 years' time, that timber's coming to the end of its rotation and being harvested. As a UK, we need to decide how much do we want to do, how much manufacturing do we want to do in the UK, and how much do we want to outsource to anywhere else in the world where it may happen to the same sort of level of environmental standards or not. So lots of questions in that regard. Scottish marketplace has always been heavier to timber frame when you're building houses than the English marketplace. So typically in Scotland, I'll get my numbers wrong, but it's about 80-90% timber frame to sort of 10-20% bricks and blocks. If you go south of the border, it's almost opposite that, so 80-90% of construction is bricks and blocks. But we're seeing an increasing interest in the use of timber frame, so we know that the demand for timber is going to increase. Equally, in the UK, we know we've got one of the smallest percentage forest covers of any country in continental Europe, so it's pretty abysmal when it comes to forest cover, so we know we could do more there. But equally, there are so many important land uses. We need food security. How do we see that in balance with forestry? So there's a lot of big weighty topics there. The government down in Westminster signed into being the Timber and Construction Roadmap earlier on this year, so that's looking to utilise the forest resource that we've got in the UK and specifically see it going into construction. So that's nothing to do with a day in my life, but that's the big picture of what goes on. What do I actually get up to? So I'm general manager for James Jones covering the South Scotland region. So I've got just over 200 employees in South Scotland. So ultimately I take a sort of a strategic and an operational role in terms of what goes on in that area. Ultimately, I'm responsible for the health, safety and welfare of the people I've got working on site, and that's a very important aspect of what I do. It's also very important that the company's profitable, otherwise it wouldn't be there. So I'm looking after that. The family that I work for, thankfully, they're very keen to invest the profits of the company in new products. So we're overseeing projects. So there's man management, there's project management, there's looking after people. Sadly, there's lots of meetings, especially on Teams involved as well, which is part of all our lives. But communication is a huge part of what we do, and as has been said, de-siloing things, actually getting different people from different sectors talking to find the best solution for everyone and the planet.
Thank you, Rob. And just to reiterate, 70% of our timber is imported at the moment. It's crazy. We're going to be building more timber. So forestry, another sector that absolutely is looking for people, for graduates, in a really exciting sector. And you can be out in the woods as well as inside designing on computers and such like. Now, as I would say, I could talk to all these. I mean, what an amazing array. Doctor, lawyer, farmer, forest, you've got everything here. So make the most of these wonderful people, and any questions? If not, I'm going to talk to them, which I would love to do.
Slingshotting of Gail O'Gorman's anti-expertise siloing agenda, I was wanting to ask Mary. So I'm not sure how to phrase this question, so please help me. I'm curious about this industry and academia link area. I wasn't aware of this at all, I guess. Just curious about more about it. What sorts of people in academia perhaps are to do with that, and who in industry will be doing that?
Not everybody.
Right.
So, some of our companies, a lot of companies will be set up by scientists. But scientists are not necessarily the people best placed to run a company. They will have an idea, but they might not know how to take it to market. I know certainly, I looked at spinning out a company, and looking back now, it's a ridiculous idea. It was a product I thought I needed, but I don't know if anybody else in the world, and actually technology moved on quickly, and it's been the next 5 years, it would have been really the next. Some of our companies, so I think we want to do with Thistle, they look at wool products. They have one of the only wool mills in the Highlands, in the Middle East, which is scandalous, frankly, that there's not any wool mills up there. But she's a real driver for sustainable fashion and what maybe stuff that we all do. But she's actually an accountant. And she set up this company based on what you should. I don't know if you met her. She's absolutely brilliant.
Yes.
Yeah.
She was at one of our. Yeah.
So she's an accountant who set up a company that has a bit of bio-based stuff in it. So we've done some projects with her looking at taking wool from Scottish sheep and turning it into high quality sort of cashmere-like products. Because Scottish sheep is really coarse and rough and not good for clothing. So that's one angle. So people that are setting up companies aren't necessarily the scientists. But within a company, you need everybody. You need the people with the economics background. You need people that understand sales and marketing. That's huge. You need engineers. One of our the companies, the area we're really struggling with in the engineers, because engineers can go offshore and earn a fortune. They don't earn as much in a biotech startup, but it's the same skill set. So there almost any career can dive into the biotech field. And it's also about that strategic thinking as well, and the investment. So there are a lot of investment firms that are they're green investment firms. So Mark Bowman, cyclist, if you've heard of him, he cycled around the world. He manages one of the biggest green investment firms in Scotland. And his company's invested specifically in biotech companies. So he's come from he grew up on a farm in Perthshire and didn't have a conventional education. He spoke at a conference a couple of years ago and didn't really go through the formal education pathway. And his parents schooled himself on a farm, and now that's what he's doing. He's investing in and green companies. So there's space for everybody in there, and it needs that outside the box thinking a lot of the time as well, because we're thinking about doing things in a different way or doing things that have never been done before. Actually, it's about what can we do, how can we push it, and how can we change this. And the petrochemical industry isn't actually that old, but it's everywhere, and it's how can we transition away from that. So space for everybody.
Would anyone like to add to that about what degrees might be useful in your area, or is it anything goes? Anyone else like to?
I think some formal training can be good in some areas, but equally it's having the people who are enthusiastic and passionate. And that's, if someone comes to me, the last graduate I employed has a degree in philosophy and politics, and I run a sawmill, and some days with the people we employ, a degree in philosophy and politics might be quite a good thing. But it really is having that passion and that drive. So there's a certain amount that can be learned and certainly can be brought to the party, but equally not being put off by
this
people
is
who
a
are coming.
difficult one, the way that so many companies recruit nowadays, because yes, these words I'm writing down because they come up from everyone. It's passion, being curious, teamwork, problem solving, communication skills. This keeps coming up. But in this day and age of the way that students submit their CV, they're ruled out before they're able to express
Like
their
ask the
passion.
HR department. Yeah.
And CVs and job interviews
Yes.
are very, very focused. Like, I don't know if you guys do this, where you would edit your CV to specifically focus on one job. How much of your experience are you leaving out? How much of your life experience that, oh, I didn't know you could do that? And it's those parts that you tend to find are the useful parts to get involved. There was a big professor who was saying, nope, it's got to be no biology students, it's got to be finance and business students. And the next thing, there was an art student who gave probably one of the best infrastructure pitches I have ever heard in my life. And she could have been a lawyer. She knew everything. And she was an art student. Now, you can't just rule out anyone because that's what their degree is or that's their ability. If you start doing that, you miss people like the art student who might as well have been a lawyer with how much she knew infrastructure law. So don't think of it as, oh, this is my degree, this is what I've got. It's like, no, what do you bring to the table? What's your skill set? And how can you apply that?
But is it easy for the students to get that across in what's a very limited form? This is my fear.
This change. I was at a meeting yesterday with an organisation who are setting up a tool to overcome that, and it's going to be around competencies and skills, and then they're using AI, buzzword, but they're using it in a productive way to match skills and competencies to jobs, and they're working with employers, they've been working with the Department of Work and Pensions as well. And it's very much on graduates and school leavers and trying to expand what you were all like, you are serious and look at it as well. But I mean, I've worked in loads of different sectors. I'm a card carrying scientist, but doing science for about 10 years of my career.
Say, don't think your life needs to be linear, because we're fed this culture of coming through school, exams, degree, masters, and you go into what you're doing and you stay in that. That's the culture we've been given. Your life is not linear. You can jump about at any time. You can retrain at any time. If what you're doing doesn't suit you or want to do something else, you could be a student at 60 and go and do another degree and another master's and do it all again. So don't think what you're choosing now necessarily has to has to be your life path forever. You can really mix and match now because education is available to all at any stage, which is fantastic. So you get that lovely eclectic mix of the skills that you have. You know, I went to medical school, I went to a sausage factory, and I came out as a sausage. I've just mixed with other sausages. It's incredibly boring. But when you get, you know, and start mixing with people in different fields, that's when the magic really begins to happen, for sure.
I think perseverance as well is probably one thing you need to really consider. Like, I think one of the jobs that really transformed like the route that I was going on anyway, I really wanted the job, so I made sure my CV was targeted, and I did that for a lot of jobs. But it was as much picking up the phone every couple of days and speaking to the office manager and saying, "Are you interviewing yet?" And there's I've got 2 young boys, and one of the stories I read a lot for is T.S. Eliot, the cat. It's the cat's not film, but the original the original T.S. Eliot poem. And there's a line at the end that says, "You know, make sure you make friends with the cat at the door." And I'm kind of talking to them was actually saying that that's as much the person that you first meet. Sometimes might be receptionists, might be the office manager. They're sometimes the people that open the doors for you, because they'll be the people that say that person is going to be good. Put that, you know, they'll put the CVs in front of whoever it is that's hiring, and it's a good kind of point of, you know, treat everyone like, try and treat everyone with kindness and respect, and actually that will probably work in your favour long term as well.
It's generally the people you like have the good interpersonal skills that you want to employ, rather than the person with fantastic list of achievements.
I thought my current job, because the person who was recruiting was a postdoc in the department where I did my PhD, and we'd gone out on a couple of nights out, and then we bumped into each other 20 odd years later. He asked me to come onto the scientific advisory board for ILSC. Through that, I learned we were looking for somebody in the show with them. I thought, "Take me."
We could carry on chatting, but is there so if we, you know, any other questions or, you know, or observations that anyone would like to make? Are you all do you know what you want to be? Are you all dead set in your career? Do you know what you're going to apply to? Are you? No? No, this is your chance.
Following on from the point that was made there about be open to be trainable. Within the agricultural sector, the dairy industry has gone through massive upheaval. When I left college, more years than I care to remember, there was 2,500 dairy farms in Scotland. There's now 700, but there's the same number of cows. Farms have scaled up. That means the farmer is less hands-on, so they're using higher labour. The dairy farms that have they recruit a new milker, they don't want somebody with milking experience. They want someone that's trainable to do it their system and their technique. So be open-minded to learning, and that's the best of ways I think anybody could have.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, and following what Maria said in our last session, that was interesting careers or interesting journeys, and you know, that was just demonstrating that a lot of people go into one thing and then they get sideways to something else, and then leapfrog to something else, then eventually find what they want. But everything's useful on the way. You're learning on the way, one skill here, one skill there. They're normally transferable. So don't worry, don't think you have to find this ideal job first time. It may be that it's just a route, and you'll always be learning, and it will always be useful, whatever you're doing.
Make up your own job if there's things you really like. I'm working with a ceramic psychotherapist. So he was a ceramicist, trained in psychotherapy, and he does ceramics with his patients and does psychotherapy, you know, through the movement and the meaning of the art of it. So you can really come up with some really novel things that will be really well received.
And your priorities will change as you go through life as well. I mean, I was the academic. Then I had the kids. It's like, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to be spending time at home with them. And when I went for this job, one of the main things was, can I work from home so I can be at home when they come ready for school? So my priorities completely changed. And it doesn't have to be something life changing. It has to be almost anything. And sector, when you are this age, jobs are completely different.
Right, well, we're at the hour. This session has been recorded. It will be available on the website. Tell all your friends about it. These wonderful people all going to be available to speak to at their stands from now on. There are 2 more sessions in the afternoon. As I say, we're SEDA. We're always looking for young volunteers. And so if you'd like to join SEDA, please do. There's QR codes. We'd love to hear from you. But now I'd really like to thank my fantastic panel, Maria, Michaeli, Mary, Rob, and Neil. Thank you very much for sharing your job thoughts.